Okay. The second situation about consent, especially in Portugal here, and not only in Portugal, is the WorldCoin. So WorldCoin, I think sometime last year, it was around the digital identification platform, digital coin. So they give you grants, but in order to get access to the grants, they need to verify you. So the way they will verify you is to scan your iris, your you call it the iris scan, okay, your eyeball, okay. So basically, the problem with that is it was later found out that these agents that would verify you were verifying minors in order to get their bonuses or their points, and then eventually the CNDP, which is the Commission for National Data Protection for Portugal, stepped in and tell them, hey, you guys have to stop your operations. Okay, so that was it. All right, and so for a consent to be for consent for consent for consent to data processing to be informed, the data subject must be provided with detailed information about the data processing in a clear manner, okay? Accessible forms using clear and plain language. As a minimum, this should include the identity of the controller and the contact details of the DPO if possible, the purpose of the processing for which the personal data will be used, the subject's rights as guaranteed by the GDPR and the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, in particular the right to withdraw, consent, or access their data. Okay, all of those articles that guarantees the rights of the data subject. Okay, and how long will the data be retained? Like I said before, some of these companies, especially the recruitment platforms, they will have automated systems to delete your information after 6 months or a year or something like that. But they will still ask you if you want them to keep your information. Yeah. So in that area, they do comply with the GDPR. Okay. Now, informed consent. Consent to certain areas of scientific research. It's not often possible to fully identify the purpose of personal data processing for scientific research at the time of collection. Okay, therefore, subjects should be allowed to give their consent to certain areas of scientific research when in keeping with recognized ethical standards for scientific research. Okay, subjects should also have the opportunity to give their consent only to certain areas of the parts of the research. Okay, and uh, in research projects, in the course of in research projects, if you make any significant changes to your methodologies or processing, this is provided that you've collected data, personal data, okay, and and these you have variants on data subject rights or the use of data. You should make sure the data subject is aware of the intended changes, okay, and seek and obtain their express consent. Okay, data subjects can opt in and opt out anytime for to opt out of their consent or opt in. Okay, it's not enough to offer them the opportunity to just opt out. Okay, this must be done before you make the changes. Okay, so if for some reason you're working on a project that involves complex large scale data processing, you plan to use the data in multiple projects for multiple purposes, or it is not possible fully to identify the purpose of the data processing at the time of the data collection, it is wise to use a data consent management application. The various applications that you can use. This is just to be on the safe side, okay? So consent management application is a software that helps you to collect and manage personal information, consent in line with the data protection laws and regulations. So it also enables you to gain insight into the personal data lifecycle from the moment of opt-in to the data removal, allowing you to track, monitor, and respond to the data subjects' requests and consent. preferences. Okay, these applications or softwares also allow you to centrally manage notices and propagate them to all consent collection channels as well. So, but here it brings the questions: are there exceptions to the duty to inform? Should you always inform, or there are exceptions in some cases? So, as we will see, there are some cases where the duty to inform may not apply. Okay, so if information that could cause serious damage to the data subject's health, the information should not be passed to the user. Okay, that is when the doctor or the health professional considers that the user's knowledge of the clinical situation may represent a danger to their health. Okay, and then they should not provide the information. Likewise, the user has the right to be unaware. This right may be restricted either in the interest of the user himself or herself or for the protection of others. Okay, and also, it is not necessary to impose the obligation to provide information where the data subject already processes the information, okay, where the recording or the disclosure of the personal data is expressly laid out by the law, or where the provision. So, if the data subject already knows, it is not necessary to impose the obligation to provide information. Okay, okay, and all right, okay. Also, in cases where processing is carried out for archiving purposes in public interest and scientific and historical research purposes, statistical, in this regard, there can be exemptions as well. In that regard, the number of data subjects, the age of the data, and the appropriate safeguards adopted should be taken into considerations as well. Now, what are the conditions for consent? Okay, so it says here conditions, consent should be given by a clear affirmative. Like we said, it should be very understood, it should be very explained in a clear and simple language. Okay, it should be a clear affirmative act establishing a freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous indication of the data subject's agreement to the processing of their personal data. Written, including electronic means or oral statement. Okay, silence, pre-ticked boxes, or inactivity should not therefore constitute a consent. Okay, like for example, in the case of Facebook, like they set out these forms for people to opt in. So if you don't opt in, or you decide to be silent, this should not be consent. Okay, consent should trigger an action from the data subject. Okay, they have to do something. They have to say yes or no. Okay, consent should cover all processing activities carried out for the same purpose. Okay, when the processing has multiple purposes, consent should be given for all of them, and consent must be regularly evaluated. Okay, it is never definitive and can be withdrawn at any time, like mentioned before. Okay, so for the case of Facebook, what they did was, like I said, as the lecturer said, they use a legitimate interest instead of as their legal base for training their AI. Okay, so that was how they were able to bypass that. I think that is Article 6 of the GDPR, lawful of processing. Okay, next we will talk about organ donation in Portugal and resumed consent. Sorry.